Good evening. I am very pleased to be with you tonight, and thank you all for coming. I will start with a traditional Arabic story that my grandfather told me when I was a little boy. He looked at me and he said, Grandson, there were two friends talking to each other. One said that her grandfather was very skillful in fixing broken bones. The other one replied and said, no, my grandfather was not an orthopedic surgeon. He was not skilled in fixing broken bones. Instead, all I know about my grandfather that he spread awareness to prevent bones from being broken. And in Arabic we say, يدي شاطر في تجبير الجبيرة يجبر الكسر. The other one said, يدي يجبر الجبيرة before it gets broken. We love all grandpas for what they do or what they did. This summarizes the purpose of this session. Last night, I had the privilege of having a discussion with Dr. Ran and Dr. Kim, and Dr. Jana was with us. We discussed issues related to bullying. Dr. Ran mentioned that every one of us has two wolves inside us. The evil wolf and the goodwill one. And there is always a struggle between the two wolves. Dr. Kim and Dr. Ran today will shed some light to help us how to feed the right wolf, the good wolf, to defeat the evil one that we find in every person. It is so wonderful to have such analogy that we are humans and we carry both the evil and the good in ourselves. But we should have the determination to fight the evil that may exist among us. Moral and ethical development should feed the right wolf. Moral and ethical development should prevent xenophobia, should prevent racism, should prevent bullying. As a housekeeping issue, I would like to remind the audience that on your seat you found the evaluation sheets. Please remember to fill these by the end of this session. Another thing to remind the audience that we have about 1 hour of discussion, followed by half an hour of a question and answers. We are very fortunate this evening that we have distinguished and reputable guest speakers, Dr. Ran and Dr. Kim. Dr. Kim Storey is a child development specialist, educator, and researcher who creates research-based educational programs. Booklets, videos, TV series, and websites. Her projects used by millions of families, educators, and professional organizations. All of these focus on bullying prevention and the healthy development of children. Excuse me. Our second guest speaker is Dr. Slaby. He is a developmental psychologist and senior research scientist at Harvard Medical School and Children's Hospital, Boston. Through his groundbreaking research, evidence-based programs, and international consultations, Dr. Slaby has helped to shape a global agenda for the prevention of youth violence and bullying. In addition to having a large number of individual publications on bullying prevention, Dr. Kim and Dr. Ran have jointly written a text that is used widely across the United States entitled Eyes on Bullying in Early Childhood. And it is that book which is actually a toolkit for educators and parents that will form the basis for many of the ideas that they will discuss this evening. I have the honor of moderating this session this evening and ask the guest speakers questions that help us learn more about bullying and use the right strategies to protect our children from bullying. I will start with our guest speaker, Dr. Ran. Dr. Ran, the first question I'm going to ask you, whether bullying is really a serious problem that we should be concerned about.
Yes, it is, and I'd like to thank you for the fine introduction and also say to begin with that we're both excited to be here, coming from the United States to visit your beautiful country. And we're here to speak about a very important topic, children's bullying, and more importantly, how to prevent it.
Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody here tonight. I'm very excited to be here. We're going to be talking especially about bullying in the early years, how it develops, and how to prevent it. We're excited to be here sharing this information with you because parents play a very critical role in preventing bullying before it even starts.
So is bullying a problem? The answer is yes. It's one of the most widespread, problematic, and harmful behaviors that children experience in their lifetime. The effects can last a lifetime. And the good news is that bullying can indeed be prevented or reduced. So we're going to focus on that. I'd like to show you the first international study that was carried out in the year 2001 with 30 countries asking school-aged children, were they bullied within the last 2 months? I don't know what you see in this graph, but I see both a problem and an opportunity. A problem is that all of these countries, all 30 of them, have extensive amounts of bullying. The United States, which falls in the middle, has about the average of all of these groups, which is about 30% of all children say that they were bullied within the previous 2 months. That's an extensive and a widespread problem. But I also see an opportunity, because look at the variation that you see from country to country. The top country, Lithuania, with the most extensive bullying, has more than 4 times the bullying that is found in Sweden. This means that for every 1 child in Sweden that was bullied during that previous 2-month period, 4 children were bullied during that same 2 months in Lithuania. It's important, I think, to see the opportunity here, as many of the countries have seen the opportunity. Lithuania said there's no reason why we need to be the top country in bullying and have the infamy of being the worst country with regard to bullying prevention. So they implemented anti-bullying measures and have already been successful. 1/3 of the countries that were listed on that last graph, we see 1/3 of the countries already have reduced their bullying significantly. And so it's important to realize that bullying can, and indeed often is, prevented. There's another success story, but first let's ask about the differences. What is the basis for the differences between countries in the amount of bullying? Well, some of the differences may be attributable to cultural factors, but there's such changeability that we see an opportunity to make those changes, no matter what the cultural factors are. And in the United States, there has been another success to report. In the year 2008, the United States government, Department of Education, sent out a request to all 50 states saying and asking them to create bullying prevention legislation and to use anti-bullying measures in their states. Among those states that have adopted some of these procedures and policies and already created legislation, we now know from a recent study that there's been a 25% reduction in physical bullying and a 20% reduction in verbal bullying in those states that were the first adopters. So in summary, we see that there's great opportunity for change. There's a problem with bullying, but there's also an opportunity to reduce and prevent it.
Thank you very much. This is about the international bullying trends. But, Dr. Kim, what do we know about bullying in the United Arab Emirates?
There have been a number of studies looking at the amount of bullying that occurs amongst school children in the UAE, starting in 2005. In a recent study in 2015, showed that there are high levels of bullying among school children in both public and private schools. We know that approximately 40% of students report that they experienced bullying, ridicule, or verbal abuse. But the good news is that these same students also believe that if their teachers witnessed them experiencing verbal abuse, they would step in to stop it. This is an important step in bullying prevention. The Abu Dhabi Education Council, ADECT, has engaged in a number of anti-bullying actions, trying to help to stop the bullying that occurs in schools. For example, they've created educational guidelines for dealing with bullying in the schools, both public and private. They are installing cameras in schools throughout Abu Dhabi to keep a closer eye on bullying and to try to stop it. They believe that reporting bullying is very important. So they've asked principals in schools, public and private, throughout Abu Dhabi to report bullying as soon as they see or hear about it, any bullying that occurs on the school premises. Through these actions, we hold promise to reduce the level of bullying among school-aged children in Abu Dhabi.
Young children and bullying. Probably we would say this is just the evil wolf in us. The question is, Does bullying happen in early childhood
Yes,
with very young children?
Yes, it does. And not only does it, we're happy to be here today to focus on one of the newest, one of the most exciting, and one of the most important sources of information, the topic of bullying prevention in early childhood. Since you are teachers and parents are the key to stopping bullying and preventing it in the early years, we're here to present to you the information that you need to understand what bullying is, how it develops in the early years, and what you can do to prevent it. We have available a toolkit that is listed on your handout that's free and available to you online, that following our talk, if you want to learn more and get started in bullying prevention with your young children, there are activities that you can perform immediately with children individually or in groups. The toolkit is called Eyes on Bullying in Early Childhood, and you can find the website in your handout.
So today we'll be focusing on how to stop bullying before it starts. There are a few basic principles that we now know about bullying in early childhood. We know that bullying can and does emerge in early childhood. But if you don't know that bullying can happen in early childhood, and you don't know what it looks like, you won't be able to see it. And if you can't see it, you won't be able to stop it. If you don't stop bullying, it will grow and spread in your family or in your schools. But what's great is that we're here today to talk about ways to intervene, because we know that when parents are prepared, we can stop bullying before it even starts.
Some people ask, how can it be that young children are capable of intentionally doing harm to their classmates? They don't believe that there can be bullying in early childhood. And yet the research shows the opposite. In a national study that was done in the United States with 2 to 5-year-olds, they found that fully 20% of those youngsters had already experienced bullying in their lifetime in the years 2 to 5. And 14% had already experienced verbal bullying in their lifetime. So bullying can and indeed does happen, but why is it overlooked? Why do many people say, that's not happening, I don't see it? Part of the reason may be that they just attribute whatever they see as, this is just kids being kids. This is just a problem child. This is just young children having a bad day. But it also may be that they don't fully understand what bullying is in young children and how it develops. In order to deal effectively, to prepare yourself and to prepare your children to stop bullying, you need to first acknowledge and understand that bullying can and indeed does happen in young children.
Well, you said that these are children, and sometimes they misbehave. Would we consider any misbehavior or any unacceptable behavior from children as bullying? How do we define bullying?
Well, let me explain to you how it develops. Where does it come from? That's one of the first questions that people often ask. Bullying develops, it doesn't appear full-blown and suddenly and mysteriously in a young child. Instead, it develops based on what they have learned from their social experiences. So let's look to some of those social experiences. First of all, the family is one of the most important training grounds for children to learn how people should treat one another. And They may see their family members treating each other with kindness and respect, or they may see their families treating each other in hurtful ways. They will certainly learn from what it is that they observe and they're involved in. Secondly, we see that the media, that is television and movies and video games, can be an important source of influence on children's bullying. There are many important programs and educational programs that are worth watching for young children and for which they learn what the good wolf should learn, like Iftaya Sim Sim or Sesame Street. We have had the honor of working together with the creator of Sesame Street and the creator of the many international co-productions of Sesame Street around the world. But unfortunately, we also see that the media often glorifies violence. It shows superheroes being rewarded for violence, being shown to be manly, heroic, being justified in what they do. And it makes violence look like fun. And young children want to have fun and often can be influenced to imitate what it is that they see. Siblings can be an important source of influence in a family. Typically, among siblings, one child is older, bigger, maybe stronger, maybe more powerful, and sometimes that child can choose to bully or pick on the brother and sister. And then there's play groups and preschool and kindergarten classrooms. This is the first time, mostly, that young children have the opportunity to interact with new children that they've never met before in a large group. And in that group, it's very important for them to see what happens in that group. Whether what happens is, again, treating each other with respect or treating each other in an aggressive way. If there's one child in that classroom, it can be only one child who comes into that classroom and begins to bully. Where did that child learn it? Well, perhaps in the home, perhaps in the media that they watched, or among the sibling interactions that they had. But that child, if that child is allowed to continue bullying, all of the other children in that group will be watching and learning. And what they unfortunately might learn is to join in on that bullying, is to begin to bully themselves. And in that way, if bullying is allowed to go forward unchecked in that play group or preschool or kindergarten, by the end of the school year, there may be many bullies in that classroom, having learned how to bully and had practice in doing it throughout the year and learned it from each other. There's also the issue of developmental pathways that children face who are allowed to continue bullying. When children are allowed to bully, they develop patterns of behavior that begin to be seen throughout the rest of their life. For example, children who bully and continue bullying become older children who bully, and then they become involved in domestic violence, and they can even become involved in gender role-related violence or in workplace violence. Some children who are allowed to continue to bully become criminal violent youngsters or adults. Children who are victimized also show consequences. A child who is allowed to or is continually victimized is likely to grow up being depressed or to have low self-confidence, maybe throughout their entire life. And then the children who witness violence also may feel guilty that they haven't done more about that as they grow older, and it continually haunts them. So there are negative consequences for allowing bullying to continue, even in a preschool child, and to develop the developmental pathways that can lead to worse problems later in life.
You asked about how we define bullying.
Yes.
Well, it's important to define bullying because we need to know what bullying is if we're going to be able to see it and stop it. So what is bullying? Bullying has three defining characteristics. It is psychological abuse and physical abuse. And the three defining characteristics are: bullying is intentional. A bully intentionally hurts another child. Bullying is repeated. A child who bullies another child over and over again. Bullying is also an abuse of power. A child uses his or her power to hurt another child. Unless a behavior meets all three of these defining characteristics, we don't consider it to be bullying. So bullying is intentional, repeated, and an abuse of power. There are four main types of bullying. The first type of bullying that many of you are probably familiar with is physical bullying. Physical bullying involves things like pushing, or hitting another child, or kicking another child. The second main type of bullying is verbal bullying. Verbal bullying includes things such as taunting, or insulting, or yelling at another child. The third type of bullying, which is harder to detect and develops a little bit later but still develops in young children, is called relational bullying. Relational bullying is when one child tries to exclude another child from their playgroup, or uses friendship to hurt. Or, and perhaps some of you parents are familiar with this, might say, "You can't play with me if you're going to be her friend," or "Come play with me, don't play with that child over there." So it's using friendship to hurt. And there's a fourth type of bullying that is called cyberbullying. Cyberbullying uses text or images from cell phones or the internet to hurt another child. Typically, young children are not involved in cyberbullying, but it is a type of bullying that we can expect to develop in later years and important to watch out for as children get older.
So what does bullying really look like in young children? Well, it often looks quite different than bullying in older children. And we have to be aware of this. What we see is, in terms of behaviors of young children, are often what we might call pre-bullying behavior. These are aggressive behaviors that are harmful, but they don't yet meet the criteria of bullying. And yet we call them pre-bullying behavior because if left unchecked, they are precursors and they are likely to lead to actual bullying.
Young children like to experiment with different ways of behaving. They may push others aside, yell mean things, not include kids in their playgroup. But these behaviors, although they're hurtful, are not yet bullying because they are not intentional, repeated, and there's not an abuse of power. Let's take a look at how some behaviors in young children may develop into bullying if they're not stopped by parents and teachers. First, think about young children who like to whisper secrets or call each other silly names. This might just be playful teasing, but when these behaviors are done intentionally to hurt another child, then they turn into bullying. So teasing turns into taunting, and nicknaming turns into name calling.
Also, we all enjoy a good laugh with our friends, and we laugh with them. But if laughing with them turns into laughing at them, making fun of them, insulting them, in order to hurt their feelings, then that is bullying. We also know that leadership involves directing people, telling people what to do, organizing them, and we would like all of our children to develop leadership skills. And yet, if a child begins to get bossy and then begins to threaten other children, telling them what to do and coercing them, forcing them to do something that they don't want to do, that's bullying.
As I'm sure you know, young children engage in rough and tumble play. But when these actions are done physically to intentionally hurt another child, it turns into bullying. So it's important to look out for what we call these pre-bullying behaviors so that we can stop them before they turn into actual bullying.
Thank you. As parents and teachers, what should we look out for when it comes to bullying?
Well, it's important to realize that there are three players in a bullying situation. There's the bully, there's the victim, and there are all the children who are standing around watching the bullying happen. That is the bystander. It's important to realize that a bystander is very important in a bullying situation. Hurtful bystanders can encourage the bullying by cheering the bullying on or even joining in the bullying themselves. But helpful bystanders can help the situation and actually stop the bullying by intervening, by saying stop, or going to get help. So we want to encourage our children to be helpful rather than hurtful bystanders. But what are the warning signs of bullying? How do you know if your child is involved in a bullying situation? Well, children often don't have the words to talk about bullying. They're often scared to tell you, or perhaps they're embarrassed. So what should we look out for? What are the warning signs? Sometimes children involved in bullying don't want to go to school. Sometimes they don't want to attend the activities that they used to like. Sometimes children who are bullied complain of physical symptoms like headaches or stomach aches, or perhaps they have trouble sleeping. So it's important for us as parents to look out for these physical and psychological symptoms so that we might see when children are involved in bullying. You might ask, who's most at risk for bullying? And how do I know if the child in my family is at risk for bullying? We do know that some children are more at risk than other children. So who's most at risk for bullying? It may be children who don't have many friends. It may be children who are new to a community or new to a school. Sometimes it's children who appear to be different from their peers, perhaps different in the language they speak or the country they come from, perhaps different in an ability. Maybe children think that they're too smart, perhaps different in a disability. Maybe they have trouble playing sports or have trouble with walking, for example. Or it could even be differences in wealth. So it's important for us to think about kids who are most at risk and identify those kids in your family who may be at risk for bullying so we can make sure to look out for them and to intervene if needed.
There's a simple way to understand, I think, how the dynamics work with the bully, the victim, and the bystanders. And it's called the bully, we call it the bully game. The bully game starts with a bully who initiates the game by picking out a particular child that the bully believes they can dominate and make cry and give over the toy. And then the bully operates by a very simple principle. Win, stay. Lose, switch. A win is when the bully actually does dominate that young child and gets the child to cry, to cower, to complain, to be upset, and to give the toy over to the bully. If that happens, the bully has won the round of the game, and the bully will stay with that same child and repeatedly bully that same child. It's also true if the bystanders laugh at the bullying that's going on, that will support the bully to stay because that's an additional win. The bully has won by getting the victim to submit and by getting the bystanders to do nothing, or perhaps the teachers in that setting to do nothing, or to, even worse yet, to laugh at or join in on the bullying. However, the other side of the principle is lose, switch. If the bully loses, and this means that the bystanders do not laugh at and maybe even speak up and say, that's not nice, or say to the victim, come on, be my friend, let's go play together. If that happens and the child does not submit, but instead assertively stands up to the bully, proud and tall, and stands up for their own rights, then the bully has lost. Now, the bully might switch in that case and try another child, or maybe a third child. But if the bully finds that they cannot win, they'll give up the game. Game over, done. There's no bullying in that situation. The bully has been defeated at the bullying game.
We want to suppress the evil wolf. We want to prevent bullying. How can we do that?
Very good question, because that's why we're here tonight. We've now heard a lot about the problem of bullying, and we need to know what to do to prevent it. And where we start is with our toolkits. You can take a look at the activities in our toolkit because they are there for you as parents to work with your children, to help your children build the skills that they need to stop bullying or prevent it from happening in the first place. In our activity book, we start with an activity called Story Swap. This is an important activity for getting children to talk about bullying, the first step in dealing with bullying. In this activity, you begin the conversation. I'm sure that some of you are sitting there thinking about a time when maybe you were bullied when you were younger. So start by telling your child a story about bullying that you experienced when you were younger. Perhaps share your feelings about that bullying situation or talk about something that you wish had done differently. This opens up the door for children to express their own feelings about bullying and tell their own stories, the first step in preventing bullying. In another activity, What is Bullying? Ask children to give their own examples about bullying behavior. Your child may tell you about a time they were pushed in the schoolyard, or about a time that they didn't allow another child to join their playgroup. You can explain that although these behaviors may hurt another child, they're not yet bullying. And help your child understand intentionality, that bully's intention is to hurt someone. So how would you help your child understand intentionality? In our activity, A Mistake or On Purpose, we give children examples and ask them to judge whether it's a mistake or on purpose. For example, in one example, Kim steps on Ron's toe by accident and says, "I'm sorry, Ron." Is that a mistake or on purpose? You can explain to your child that that's a mistake. But in a second example, I am very angry at Ron, and I stomp hard on Ron's toe, and I hurt Ron. Ask your child, is that a mistake or on purpose? They'll understand that that one is on purpose, and you can explain that that is part of bullying. The intention is to hurt, and that's not a behavior that we want them to engage in. By doing these activities, you help children understand bullying, and they talk openly about bullying and are willing to share their experiences with you.
We also want to promote kindness and respect because respectful deeds, deeds of kindness, are the opposite of bullying. And the more you create the positive, the good wolf, the positive deeds, and the more you encourage children to engage in those, the less bullying you're going to find. Of course, the reverse is true. If you leave bullying unattended and don't stop it, it will also suppress the acts of kindness for that child. Now, we all would like for our children to develop power and influence in their lives, to be leaders in some ways. And yet, sometimes we see that power and influence, instead of being turned toward helping those most in need, it's instead turned to hurt those who are most vulnerable, simply because they can do it.
Well, what does Ron mean about kids being powerful? What makes a child powerful? Well, think of one example. Your child might feel powerful because they can tie their own shoe. They may look down on a child who can't tie their shoe and call them names because they can't do something that they can do. Teach your child to use that power for good rather than to hurt. Rather than to call that child a name because they can't tie their shoe, teach your child to be helpful and use the power to tie the other child's shoe or teach them how to tie their shoes. In this way, they can use the power to help. Celebrating diversity is important. It's important to talk to your children about ways that we are diverse and different from each other, perhaps because of the language we speak or perhaps of the country we come from. One way to do this is to focus on differences, the specialness of differences. For example, the different foods we eat or the different ways we dress. But there's also a way for children to see similarities in each other. All children have a favorite color or a favorite toy that they like to play with, or they can tell you what their favorite gift is for their birthday. Have children share these favorite colors and favorite toys and favorite gifts so they can see that children are both similar and different from each other.
One of the most important things you can do to prepare a child to be a bully preventer and to not engage in bullying is to teach them the social skills that they need to avoid bullying. One of the most important skills that bullies need is empathy. Victims need to learn assertiveness, and bystanders need to learn how to problem solve. And we develop activities in our toolkit for each of these social skills. Empathy is taught by teaching a child to think and feel what other people feel, to be able to put yourself in the other child's shoes, to see things from a different child's perspective. A child who can understand empathy is likely to not want to bully because they can understand that it hurts the other child, and they would feel badly about hurting another child. Empathy is also taught in our toolkit by way of the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule, very simply stated, is treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I understand there's
In Arabic we
an
say,
Arabic saying for that.
عامل الناس كما تريد أن يعاملوك وكما تدين تدان.
So in this activity of the Golden Rule, we ask children to think about, how would you want to be treated? Think of yourself. If you want to be treated nicely, then that means you should treat others nicely. But there's another side to the Golden Rule. We call it the reverse Golden Rule. If you don't want to be treated badly, then don't treat others badly. We talk about, with children, if you don't want mean behavior directed toward you, then don't direct mean behavior toward other children. This is the Golden Rule and the reverse Golden Rule, to get children to understand that bullying hurts, and it's a particularly important social skill for bullies to have. Now there's a second social skill, and that's called assertiveness. That's particularly important for victims to develop. Children who can react to bullying in effective and non-aggressive ways are less likely to be targeted. And we have several activities that focus on assertiveness building skills in young children.
In our yes and no activity, you coach children how to be assertive. So for example, in a situation where your child is playing with a toy and another child wants that toy, don't tell your child to give up the toy as soon as the other child wants it, but rather coach your child to say, I'm sorry, I'm playing with a toy now. You can have it when I'm done. This teaches a child to stand up for themselves. You can also coach the child who wants the toy to be patient and wait their turn in taking the toy. By doing this, you teach children how to be assertive and stand up for themselves.
A third social skill is problem solving, and this is a skill that bystanders particularly need. It can be difficult to understand or to be ready to respond as a bystander that can help stop bullying. We use an activity called What If? We tell short stories to children, and ask them what would happen if this happened. For example, children are playing together, and one child calls another child stupid. What would happen if the bystander said to that bully, "That's not nice to say"? What would happen if that bystander said to the child who is being targeted, "Come on, you can play with me"? What would happen if that child decided to report to the teacher that that wasn't very nice, what that person did? We get them, young children, to think about what would happen if a bystander intervened in such a way that could help prevent or stop the bullying.
Sometimes young children need reminders about what to do in a bullying situation. And sometimes young children respond very well to visual representations. This is an example of visual representations about what a child can do when faced with bullying. Sometimes children can only focus on one or two options at a time. So in this example, stay calm. That would be the first option. Some children get very nervous in a bullying situation. They may start to cry. They may want to run away. So if you help children take a deep breath and stay calm, that's a first step in preventing bullying. A second step in preventing bullying would be to figure out a way to tell the person to stop. You may need to work with your child on different ways to say this. If they are verbal and can say a few words such as stop or don't do that or that hurts me, that's sometimes enough to stop the bullying behavior. If your child has trouble getting the words out, sometimes a simple hand sign with their hand like this will get the bully to stop. There are also two other options for responding to bullying. One would be go to a safe place. Sometimes in your home, in a playgroup situation, you may have designated a safe place where children can go and get help from an adult. Or sometimes in a preschool playgroup situation in an organization, there can be a designated area to go get help and be with an adult. And in the last fourth option here, it's important to tell children if they need help, go get a friend to help, go find an adult to help. Sometimes it's too much for a child to deal with a situation alone. So you may want to, in your own home, come up with some visual representations that will help children remember 1, 2, or 3 things that they can do when faced with bullying. So it's not just important to teach children the skills and strategies that they need to stop bullying, but also important to think about the whole environment, both at home and at school. So in your home environment, think about a shared vision. Make sure that in your home you are creating a bullying-free environment where bullying is not allowed to happen. Come up with expectations for your child to engage in respectful behavior. Make sure your child knows those expectations. Also come up with consequences. What will you do if your child engages in a bullying behavior? What are the consequences that your child should expect? It helps to sit down with children and have them come up with a set of rules about bullying. So, for example, if they encounter bullying, they need to stand up for the person getting bullied. Or if they think that they need help in a bullying situation, make sure that you go get help from an adult or from a friend in a bullying situation. If you post these set of rules in your home with visual representations, children will be more likely to refer to them and help themselves in a bullying situation. And one last thing, teach by example. Remember that young children imitate adult behavior. They are going to be watching what you say and what you do. So if you treat others with respect, then children are more likely to treat their peers with respect.
I'll go back to Grandpa's story about the grandpa who's skilled in fixing broken bones. Now, the children or some children were bullied. What do we do?
So what happens if your child is actually involved in a bullying situation? What should you do? Don't panic, but just make sure that you intervene immediately. You need to take action. You first need to make sure that the children in the bullying situation are safe. You don't want anyone to get physically hurt. You also don't want them to get verbally hurt. By intervening immediately, you make sure that children know that you won't stand for bullying, that bullying is not allowed, and that you, as the parent, are there to protect them. You can also look at a bullying situation as a teachable moment, and Ron will explain how.
Yeah, what should you do if you see an incident of bullying emerging before your very eyes? You have to be ready to decide quickly what to do. For example, you're looking at a play group, and you see one child push another child, make them cry, and takes the toy away, while other children are watching. What do? We have a simple formula, and we call it stop, coach, engage. Stop the bully. That's the first thing to do. But this is not a time to stop the bully and give the bully a lecture and start scolding the bully. That should have happened a long time before that. The child should know that bullying is not allowed, and all you need to do is say no bullying and make sure the bullying has stopped. Secondly, coach the victim. It's not the best idea to step in and solve the problem for the victim. Instead, stand up that victim, stand behind the victim and coach them to stand tall, look the bully in the eye and say, "That's my toy, and I'd like it back, please. I'll give it to you when I'm done." You can coach a young child and support the child by standing behind them. And in a preschool classroom, this will almost magically work to have the bully actually give the toy back. The bully game has been defeated by doing that. And then third, pay attention to the others who have just watched this interaction, the bystanders, and engage them and perhaps suggest, would you like to take this child, the victim, into your play group or out to play? Or I'm glad that you did not laugh at that interaction because it wasn't funny. So stop, coach, engage. You can quickly and efficiently stop the bullying, coach the victim, and engage the bystander, teaching all three of these players, their role in stopping and preventing bullying in that situation.
Thank you. And finally, what is your takeaway advice? What do you want us to remember?
Well, let's review what we learned today. First and foremost, take bullying seriously. Realize that bullying can and does emerge in early childhood. Talk about it with your child. Watch out for it so that you can prevent it when it happens. Second, stop hurtful behaviors before they turn into bullying. Recognize those early pre-bullying behaviors and don't let them escalate. Third, help children develop the skills that they need to prevent and stop bullying. These are the important skills of empathy, assertiveness, and problem solving. Fourth, use the activities in our toolkit with your child, either individually or in small groups, to help them practice ways to prevent and stop bullying. Fifth, use the teachable moments of stop the bully, coach the victim, and engage the bystander. And lastly, make sure that you encourage your child to be a helpful bystander, not a hurtful bystander.
By the way, these tips are available to you in your handout, these 6 last tips. And by following these tips, you too can stop bullying before it starts. We want to emphasize that parents and teachers play a critical role and encourage you to keep your eye on bullying in the early years, both at home and in the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for staying within the time frame. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, skills, expertise with the audience. Now we give the floor to the audience to ask questions. Remember that we have people carrying microphones. Please raise up your hand, and people with the microphones will come to you to give you the microphone to ask your question. Please be brief with your questions.
Hi, my name is Amal. I work closely with private schools as a member of Private School Quality Assurance in Abu Dhabi Education Council. I would like to thank you for the input, which is very valuable to both parents and educators. We have sent the email about this event twice to schools. However, there might be a miscommunication within schools themselves, as I keep not seeing parents coming or teachers coming to these sessions. So I truly hope that the message goes back to schools and they realize how important these sessions are. My second point is, by the Supreme Council of Motherhood and Childhood, governed by Her Highness Al-Imarat Sheikha Fatima, there is an initiative which is called Anti-Bullying Program that's going to be run across all schools in Abu Dhabi and the Emirates of UAE. It has been initially started with the selected schools, private schools and government schools. It's also a preventive program with preventive tasks and activities to be done with students at a younger age, so that this can be prevented before it even starts. And it teaches the teachers and staff to find signs of bullying, bullies, and people who are less confident in defending themselves from at an early stage. So that's a very enrichment program. We are all looking forward to this full implementation. And thank you for your input again.
Thank you for your remarks.
My name is Adra Zaabi, and I am working at the Health Authority Abu Dhabi. And the thing is that the lady there, she mentioned that there is a lot of teachers invited to come to such a session, but they didn't attend, and this is really creating some kind of nerve, because I witnessed that my young brother been bullied in the school, and there is a negative reaction from teachers. They don't really interfere, and they don't stop this kind of reactions, which is really confusing and kind of like weird. So I hope more teachers to be involved in such sessions in the future. Another thing is that now when I am about to become a mother, I was thinking, when you were talking about bullying and educating children to understand what bullies is all about, is it healthy to talk to them before they go to school about bullying, and or that might maybe create some kind of fear in them? Is it, shall I let them experience the school and then when they come back I ask them, or shall I start this from the very beginning before they go to school and I explain this kind of stuff for them?
Should we talk about bullying before we send our children to schools?
Yes, I think it's very important to start the discussion before children attend school. The first time you hear about bullying shouldn't be because your child is involved in a bullying incident. So the reason that we start the discussion early is to prevent that from happening. You don't want to scare children, so just open up the conversation. Talk about different kinds of hurtful behaviors and very matter-of-factly explain what a bullying situation is and what it might look like in school. And then you can begin to role play with your child, different ways to deal with a bullying situation, making sure that they have some assertive behaviors, that they can stand up and stand strong if a bullying situation happens to them. It shouldn't be a scary thing if we begin the conversation early.
And most parents really begin when their child has been bullied. They haven't thought about, they haven't talked about the situation until that happens. It's too bad when that happens, because bullying can be prevented even earlier, and the discussion should have started earlier. We wrote a brochure, for example, for parents, and we gave them tips. And we started with, when your child is the victim, what do you do? And then we said, but what if your child is the bully? What do you do? Parents don't like to think that that could be possible, but it is because children experiment. They could experiment with behaviors that lead to bullying. And then we completely surprise them by saying, well, what if your child is the bystander to bullying? What if your child is observing bullying? Because we know that much of bullying requires bystanders to passively accept what's going on, or even to actively contribute to what's going on in order for the bully to continue. So the bystander can be a very effective bully preventer. And if you would like your child, as I think we all would, to have our child use their power and influence to stop bullying, to support children who might be victimized, then prepare your child also as a bystander and think about the bully prevention situation from all three roles when you talk about it with your child.
Thank you. Another question.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for your lecture. Very enlightening. I hope the toolkit will have those, leaflets that you said about how, what if your child is the one being bullied and what if he's the one who's the bully. Because what I'm worrying about right now is I'm always nurturing the empathy and emotional intelligence in my own child, but I worry about, for him to be assertive. So what points do you have, like what practical pointers do you have on how to increase assertiveness in children who you feel might be a little bit more vulnerable to bullying?
We have an activity that helps children understand how to be strong in the face of bullying. And there's simple things like being able to look the bully in the eye. Don't cross your hands across your chest, but leave them at your side because you want to be assertive rather than aggressive. Think of some very simple words. Say, stop, don't do that, that hurts me. So these are various things that you can role play with your child, because unless that you have practice role playing some of these behaviors, you won't be able to do them in an actual bullying situation. Think of yourself as an adult learning a new task, and then you're put in a very anxiety-inducing situation. You may not be able to do those behaviors. But if you role play and practice those behaviors, you'll find that when you're in the actual situation, you'll be able to stand strong, stand up, look them in the eye, and say, no, please stop that.
One psychologist suggests a simple thing that almost any child can do, and that is the bully might say, that's an ugly shirt you're wearing, you're funny looking. And the child simply says, so? That stops the bully in their tracks. Instead of saying, I'm not funny looking, I like my shirt, and I'm going to cry, and so on. So? So what? And it shows that you're not going to accept the bullying in the terms that the bully is directing it toward you. You're not going to get upset by this. And you can practice this ahead of time in responses like this, or hand signals with your young child. So it's important to even role play. And when you role play, do a role reversal as well. Let your child play the other role, and you can demonstrate then what a victim could do in that situation. So it's very important, I think, to engage with your child early on to create that assertiveness.
As the speakers mentioned, modeling can be a key. If you want the child to observe assertive behavior, they have to see the model in front of them, so they would basically react following Bandura's social learning theory. Another question.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your talk. I've learned a lot about bullying behaviors, and I'm a teacher in a school, and I'm teaching grade 1, almost 6 or 7 years old, and I see some of my kids, especially boys, some of them I see they're repeatedly appealing behavior, aggressive behavior, but I think it's intentionally done, but it seems like both of them are enjoying it. And I have a problem, differentiating their intentional harming behavior between those intentional, making each other fun. It seems like enjoying it. I don't know what should I do now. It's intervening my classroom, and I want to do something about it. And I also almost, involved in our social workers and homeroom teachers. But, I don't know what exactly I have to do to help them,
Well, remember that even if it's not bullying, if it doesn't meet the definition of bullying, if it's not intentional or repeated and it's a power imbalance, it still may not be a behavior that you would like happening in your classroom. And that's reason enough to stop it. But if you are concerned that it's bullying behavior and you need to figure out how to intervene, it might help to separate the children and talk to them individually to see if they will explain to you their intent, or to see if one of them might tell you, yeah, I'm getting hurt. The more that you get to know the children in your class, the easier it will be to detect whether it is meant as an aggressive behavior, a bullying behavior, or whether they're just having fun.
Another question, thank you.
Well, thank you for the great discussion. I'm a parent. The question is, well, it's actually a couple of questions, if I may ask. The first question is, you've defined bullying pretty well for us as adults. I mean, I understand that it's intentional, repeated, and abuse of power. How can I define it for my child? I mean, using children vocabs. That's the first question. The second is, are there any video materials that I can show my child? I mean, he likes watching educational videos. So if there is anything that I can probably, maybe an online sort of portal or whatever that I can log on to and show my child some videos about bullying.
Well, I'll take the first part of the question, and maybe you can take the second. So it is important for children to understand what is bullying, just as it's important for adults to understand what is bullying. So we use these kind of words. For intentional, we use on purpose. We say bullying behavior is on purpose. And remember that activity that I explained about, is it a mistake or on purpose? So that's the first step, is intentionality. Bullying is repeated, so it's behavior that happens over and over and over again. That is something that children can understand. The abuse of power is harder for children to understand, especially younger children. So it helps to talk to your child about ways that they are powerful. It could be the example that I used of being able to tie their shoe. Maybe they can answer a question that another child can't. Maybe they're better at a particular sport than another child. Explain to them that they are powerful in certain ways, and it's important to use that power to help to teach another child how to play the sport, or teach another child how to color a good picture. That's the kind of discussion you should engage with your child about power. And then lastly, I went over the 4 types of bullying. So encourage your child to give you examples, their own examples of different types of bullying: verbal, physical, and relational bullying. That helps children to understand.
And regarding video material, we have both had the opportunity to work with the founder of Sesame Street, the creator of Sesame Street. And by the way, at one point, the Harvard faculty at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I taught for many years, was asked what was the most significant educational intervention in the last century, in the 1900s. And overwhelmingly, they said Sesame Street. Sesame Street has had such a positive effect throughout the entire world. And one of the things Sesame Street does is to pick particular topics in which to address children. It started with naming colors and learning the alphabet and so on, and it's now changed into focusing on particular issues. And the most recent one is Big Bird getting bullied. And the video shows bullying and how to prevent bullying on Sesame Street. So that's one video. We would like to see many more. We would like the opportunity. Both of us are involved in creating and being educational advisors to many programs. One recent program I'm advising on does have some bullying prevention sessions in it, episodes. The program series Little People has just been premiered, and it's going to be played worldwide, so you might hear of it. And if you do, you can bet that you'll see some material on bullying prevention. But really, we would like to have much more, because kids can learn so much in positive ways from the media about how to prevent bullying instead of the negative things that they often learn about how to promote bullying.
Thank you.
Just I want to know the point where the parent go to a psychological advice. So where that point exactly? So we know that bullying, and we try to stop that, and teacher also will try to stop. So where the point teacher or parent go to the psychological advice?
So I believe that you're asking about children who may need special help. So sometimes we find that there are children who do a lot of bullying. And even if we say, stop doing the bullying, and we try to teach empathy, they continue to bully. So there are certain children like this. And when children are young, it's just part of their experimenting with their behavior. But as they get a little bit older, say at around the age of 5 and 6, and they still haven't stopped the bullying in spite of your efforts and your teacher's efforts to stop the bullying, then it would be helpful to seek some additional help for the child. They may need some very targeted behavioral initiatives to be able to stop doing the negative behavior. But most children don't need that. Most children will respond to adults urging to stop the negative behavior and engage in more respectful behavior.
We do know, however, that there are children with special needs. And children with special needs are bullied at a rate that approximately 3 times the rate of other children. And they need special help sometimes, as well as having special needs. They need to be able to distinguish when they're being laughed at. Some children may not know that they're being laughed at instead of laughed with. Or they may not know how to respond or have the verbal skills to be able to respond effectively. And so we've begun to work and have a training program, although it's not yet available free and online as the toolkit is, but we have a training program that we've created on bullying prevention involving students with special needs. And so that sometimes takes special skills to deal with those children, to give them the support that they need. And that would be a time also to go to a psychologist who's trained in dealing with children with special needs.
Good evening. I'm here in the second row, here.
Yes, okay.
Yes. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion, because it's invaluable and it's a very vast and complex area. And firstly, I'd like to just, I'm more interested in what schools are doing to prevent bullying, because I think, it's there in all levels. I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm a sociologist also. And I have seen that schools are not giving more importance to complaints raised by parents and students, because they are just so busy with finishing their academics and doing their tests and examinations. So what I'm trying to say is, we need the media to send out messages like documentaries or social messages like cartoons and videos, regularly, like we normally see for don't smoke and don't do drugs and things like that. So we need the media also, like when the child is switching on the television, he should see these kind of things often coming. And we need the media to focus on family values, tradition and culture. And we understand that different cultures also promote a certain degree of violence. For example, in India, we say that if you don't beat the child never becomes, good. That we have that. So I'm an Indian. So, so we need to see schools do more. So for that, for example, the EDEC, I've seen that representatives of EDEC are here. I would like them to put pressure on schools to do more, to focus on sending out this message in every classroom at every level. And also there is a problem of us having special needs kids along with normal kids in classrooms. When that happens, we are faced with a more complex problem, because we have normal kids and we have 2-3 kids in each classroom who may require extra help. So that time when bullying comes, and what do we do? So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
sharing your
Yes, thank
concerns.
you.
And part of what we're doing here is to begin the conversation and share these important concepts.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, over here on this side. Hi. I'm managing a preschool, and I feel like we've focused a lot on when we're calling it bullying. But in preschool, I do feel like we can't really call it bullying. And often when a child is displaying aggressive behaviour, it's because they're either mimicking or there's some kind of reaction to something that's going on to them. And I really feel that what people really need to understand for children who are 5 and below is that there's always a hidden reason. And able to really eradicate it and to stop it from carrying further, before we even talk about how to deal with it when it comes out later on, we have to find out what that hidden reason is. And it's normally something that's happened to them or is going on around them or that they've seen, and they're just displaying that at school. So my focus really is in the preschool is to try and find the hidden reason for it, and to try and find out why the bully, because we call it a bully, but actually the bully is more like a victim of the situation that's happening. So I just wanted to mention that we have to look in preschool in the early years for the reason behind, and really find from there where to go forward with it.
Thank you for your comment. It is good to be able to identify why a certain child may be becoming a target of bullying, and to help them be more assertive and stand up for themselves so they don't get bullied. But remember that we're trying to create a bully-free environment in our schools and in our home, where everybody understands that no bullying is allowed.
But I think you're also talking...
Sorry, you misunderstood me. I'm not talking about the victim. I'm
about the
talking
bully.
about... And preschool, I'd like to really emphasize that we really can't call a preschooler a bully.
Oh,
but
I'm
what
sorry.
we can say is that the bully themselves has had something happen to them that's creating this situation. And it's normally a reaction, because it's not intentional. So it's normally a reaction or a mimicking of behavior that they've seen. So that's really the emphasis I'd like to make.
I think that's a very important point, that we sometimes use the shorthand as we talk about it and say the bully. But it's not a personality characteristic, it's a behavior. We should really be saying the child who bullies, because the child who bullies can be changed. And it's unfair to demonize a bully, to say that the bully is a bad person, because that child needs to learn just as much as the child who is victimized or the child who is the bystander to ways to change their behavior so that they're not engaged in a bullying situation. So I know that one way, for example, as you may suggest, of why a child might bully is because they've learned it at home. And if you're working in a school system, I think it's almost required that you begin to speak with the parents about that, because the child is having a difficult transition coming from the home to the school and carrying over some of the behaviors. We had a question the other day about what should we do if the parents believe that it's the child's right to bully. I think it's the preschool's right to decide to have a bullying-free environment. And you should begin with that premise, and then work with parents to say, if you have different rules, the rules in this school are the ones that a child is going to need to abide by, so why don't we work together so as to not make it difficult on that child? And here are the things that you might want to do that could help your child make an easy transition. That's one way that I think bullies become bullies. And that could be the reason why a child is bullying. And we should clearly not treat that child with disrespect or think of that child as a mean person, but rather treat them with respect also and work to change their behavior.
One more time, I want to thank the guest speakers, and I would like to remind the audience that the guest speakers will be with us. Please feel free to stay after the end of this session and come to ask them questions, discuss issues with them. And one last reminder is that please do not forget to fill out the evaluation forms. Leave them either on the seat or there is a box outside. You may drop the evaluation in the box. And one more time, I would like to, or it is your time, it is time now to thank the audience for their attendance, diligent participation, and for coming to curb the bad wolf, the evil wolf, and to feed the right wolf in creating a nurturing environment for our children. One more time, I also would like to thank the guest speakers for sharing their knowledge, expertise, sharing their wisdom, and create with us a much better environment for our children at home and in schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.